Today, the Greens and UKIP are in the studio. It's their turn in front of the cameras. I'll be talking to them very soon, but first, here's Kimberly Hunt.
UKIP came second here in the West at the European elections last year, pushing Labour back into fourth. They're a young party, formed in 1993. The Green Party have been around for a lot longer. They're a recognised party but normally do well just to hold on to the deposits, polling just over 1% of the vote in the 2005 election. UKIP is standing in nearly all of the 31 seats in our region. The Green Party have selected 22, the BNP 10 and the English Democrats 8.
Well, with us for the programme today are two candidates who believe their parties will make significant headway at this election. They're UKIP's candidate in Dorset North, that's Jeremy Nebor, and the Greens candidate in Bristol West. You saw him earlier in that film, Ricky Knight. Good afternoon to you both. I've spent a pleasant weekend looking through your manifesto, so perhaps we could ask you, there's a couple of questions on those as we start. UKIP, first of all, I mean, on tax and spend, you want spending cuts of £171 billion. That's 26%.
Yes, but you've got to realise that if we come out of the EU, we're going to save cash payments of £27 million every single day, every week, every month,
well,
every year.
That's £6.4 billion a year.
No, it isn't. No, it's not 10. It's 10 billion. When the rebate's gone, the actual cash net payment is 10 billion. It also costs us at least 50 billion to remain in the EU because of CAP payments and because of the high tariffs on food and the other costs.
But then why would you need to cut health spending, as you're suggesting in your manifesto, by a third?
It isn't that we need to cut health spending.
£40.9 billion.
It's just unrealistic to suppose that the necessary spending cuts to rebalance our financial health and stability will necessarily leave the NHS completely out of it. That is simply unrealistic.
But you want to cut a third of the NHS budget?
We hope to do so through a serious attack on waste and bureaucracy.
Do you think you can cut a third without affecting frontline services?
That is the intention, yes.
OK. Well, Ricky Knight, let's have a look at your manifesto too. You want to increase public spending, conversely. By how much?
Well, for instance, in £44 billion pounds injection into getting people back to work, essentially, through training schemes. We're talking monopoly figures here. Money is losing its meaning now, with €3 trillion invested into bailing out the casino bankers, and now they're saying we can't afford to deal with the real needs of the economy, which is not cutting public services.
How much would taxes have to go up under a Green government?
Well, we believe in progressive taxation. At the moment, it's actually at a very low level at 36%. I'm quite happy to say, on behalf of the Green Party, that we certainly will consider raising taxes up to 45%. The lower than
so how much would a high earner, say someone earning £100,000, how much would they pay
50% for over 100,000. Okay. It's preposterous that people should earn so much and get bonuses.
But you want zero growth in the economy?
Well, zero growth has a very bad image, but if you call it qualitative development, we don't have to lose our standards of living. We can't live beyond our means. We have to live within the limited resources of this planet.
Pensions of £170 a week, smaller classes, free school meals, free prescriptions, free eye tests and free dental work, but without any growth in the economy.
Another thing in the policy is the reduction of the enormous cost of quangos, which has been costed by the taxpayer's allowance, 60 billion a year. We think there will be a saving of at least 20 billion on top of that. So we're talking about 70 billion. And if I may say so, the Green Party talk about increasing tax by reference to GDP. It's a 9% increase of GDP, which is £125,000 million a year.
I think the figures might be getting us all a bit...
It is.
Get it confusing there. Yeah. Just in a sentence or two, how would the West Country improve if there was a Green government?
But in terms of economy, since we're talking about that now, we would invest massively into infrastructural development on renewable energy, waste management, certainly retraining is so important.
OK, and how would the West Country improve if there was a UKIP?
Fundamentally, small and medium-sized businesses need to have the weight of regulation taken off them. There's absolutely no doubt. And the fishing industry in the southwest will be restored. It's decimated. It hardly exists.
Who would you work with? How would you work in a hung parliament?
I have a real dream, if you like, that Caroline Lucas will be returned historically our Green Party leader.
Okay,
and I want her to hold the balance of power.
All right, and so who would you work with? Who would you work with? And what would your demands be?
Our demands would certainly be electoral reform, but we're going to have to deal with our ethical and philosophical basis in this respect. In return for working with other parties, we would have to agree or find a very strong consensus.
OK, well, it's easier to guess what UKIP would be demanding if there were a hung parliament and, you know, if there was a UKIP MP, what sort of price would he be demanding for support?
As you know, we would want a referendum on continued membership of the European Union. This has been denied to the British people at all times. We voted in 1976 on what was a common market. We thought it was a trade agreement, but in fact we're now immersed in a superstate, an undemocratic superstate.
So that would be your single thing?
No, not the single thing, but that we would want to have a referendum on our continued membership, fairly conducted, without disproportionate funding from the EU or from any other interest groups to fund that process. That would be critical. Okay. We would also, of course, like to see proportional representation, but I think the Liberals will be a very important part in ensuring that that comes about.
Say there is a hung parliament, and say as a result of that we get proportional representation.
Yes.
It means the election after this,
yes,
there could be a number of smaller parties associated in Westminster, and they have to work together. Now, does that mean that you'd have to wind back on the crazy? You'd have to be much more realistic about what you're putting in your manifesto?
Well, there's nothing crazy in our manifesto. We just want less regulation.
30% cut in the NHS spending.
No, but Vince Cable, on the Chancellor's debate, made it absolutely clear, and this is the putative Chancellor of the Exchequer, that cuts will fall seriously on the NHS, and anyone who believes otherwise is deluding themselves and fraudulent. That's what he said. Okay. Now, to say that we're a small party is grossly misleading. We had 2,500,000 people voting for us in the Euro elections, and when people feel that they will have an entree into influencing policy through proportional representation, then I think there will be a major appeal for this
Ricky,
party.
how do the Greens move out of just appealing to a fairly narrow band of people and work towards an agenda which might appeal to more people?
David, I don't agree with you, because the simple website, Vote for Policies, has put the Greens way out ahead on policies. I don't think we're crazy at all.
But when it becomes real, when it becomes that 50%
when it becomes real, we are ready. We have the structure in place.
50% tax, more tax on alcohol and tobacco, VAT on new homes, all the tax rises that you want.
The tax rises on these very elements you mentioned, tobacco, with regard to the expense on the NHS that is a result of overindulgence, if you like, in alcohol and cigarettes. All governments have been doing that ever since I was born.
UKIP is the first party, it says in its manifesto, to come out as officially sceptical of climate change.
Yes.
And you would remove climate change levies.
Oh yes, definitely. The case is not proved. The scientific case is not proved. There's no certainty about the science.
Okay, so that would be your view in a hung parliament. You'd be pushing for anti-climate change moves, I guess.
No. We have to be certain about the science before we impose £18 billion a year on the British people, which is what the Climate Change Act 2008 is costing. That's Mr. Miliband's department's own figures through to 2050. The case is not proved to sustain these withering charges.
What do you think?
Fundamentally disagree. Of course I do. It's the issue that has not been address this election, other than electoral reform.
Why do you think it has dropped off the agenda in the way it has? Is it because more people are actually becoming sceptical, and in fact they're more in tune? No, I
certainly don't believe it's because on the contrary.
Really?
Not more sceptical. It's just that the short-term pressures on individuals' lives and family lives brought upon by the economic crisis has, if you like, made people concentrate on the short term.
The coldest winter in 30 years and...
climate change we're talking about, not global warming.
The Greens support a European constitution. Why?
We also support a constitution for Great Britain, for the UK.
Why do you want a European constitution?
I think it's very important that we write out, in terms of a Bill of Rights and a European constitution, write out exactly what our aspirations are.
Can you convince him that we need a European constitution?
I'd rather not try.
Can you convince him that we don't?
We want to have restrictions on immigration for 5 years in order to protect people already here, immigrants and new entrants included. But we also want to withdraw from this regime and establish a free trade arrangement just like Norway, just like Switzerland, with freedom of movement of goods. It would be mad for the EU to legislate against us and penalise us in trading terms.
We both agree.
We buy far more from them than they buy from us.
Okay. You both agreed, though, simply that you don't want the euro.
No, that's a different point. The euro is a different point. We certainly don't want the euro, but not because it's European, but because it's a failed concept.
But you don't want the euro, why?
The Green Party is basically opposed to the Eurozone in financial terms. We believe in devolving money and currency down to the lowest devolved democracies would be. I'm in favour of a Bristol pound for a start. I think keeping money in locality. Well, again, you might call that a crazy policy, but the localisation of the money supply, the national and the international supply of money has gone crazy anyway, to use your terms. Yeah.
Okay, we could talk all afternoon, but I have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday afternoon.